Connecting your initial assets to the internet is just the beginning of your problems because you're going to have to make sense of the data coming from different types of assets and different types of devices. Omnio Edge is a solution that makes it way simpler. And Mikhail here is going to demo exactly how to connect this kind of devices. He has a bunch of them on his wall behind him, and he will use Omnio Edge and hook it up into Azure IoT Central in a matter of minutes. That's today on the IoT Show. Hey, hi everyone. This is the IoT Show. I'm Olivier, your host, and today I have Mikhail from Omnio to tell us everything about how complicated it can be to unify data coming from different types of industrial assets and devices to make sense of that data and use it in the cloud. That's a long introduction. Mikhail, how are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm actually going to try and show you how easy it can be. I'm the CEO and founder of Omnio, and we built a single product called Omnio Edge that solves this whole challenge.
Awesome. Thanks for that very short introduction about yourself. You'll have to tell me a bit more about that because my understanding that you're coming from the industry, you've been in the seat of these developers and engineers who are working on making these assets and devices connected from the factory floor or whatnot. Because, that's the reality of life today, digital transformation helping. We need to get these things connected so that we can extract the insights from these things and take action with AI in the cloud, visualization, integration into business applications, and so on. We're repeating that all the time, but that's reality. But what was the type of challenges you were seeing when you started doing that? Trying to connect these devices.
Yeah, so actually, my co-founder and I met back in 2009 when we were working for a big international industrial company, trying to connect hundreds of thousands of assets. And we tried connecting assets in logistics, water utility, smart buildings, agriculture, you name it. We tried to do remote monitoring, predictive maintenance, and all these kinds of value-adding things in all kinds of industries. And the one thing that we really came across that was the biggest problem for us was that there was a lot of different equipment to connect and to get the data out, and then to actually make it meaningful. That was actually really the biggest challenge. And the reality is that it requires so much heavy lifting and that the data is never standardized to any meaningful standard, that it means that you have to do so much work to acquire and normalize the data. And we failed at so many projects, and so many projects overran their timelines and had a hard time scaling. And that's why we then sat down and said, okay, there has to be a better software-based way. And that's what Omnio Edge is.
Got it. And we'll look at the architecture in a minute and where exactly you're positioning yourself. But I like this idea of saying, hey, I'm having a problem and, I might not be the only one. So if I find a solution to sort it out, let me not keep it for myself and let's make a business out of that. So tell me about Omnio Edge and that solution that you've been developing.
Yeah, really, we built Omnio Edge to make it easy for the IT people to collect unified data from a range of different OT data sources like devices, PLCs, OPC UA servers, but also bigger machines like CNC machines and so on. And deliver that directly into an IT-based application like Microsoft Azure IoT Central, right? And one of our key capabilities is around the unification of data. Because since all these data sources are different, it's really important to be able to transform them into a unified data model where you can trust the semantics, the units, and the quality of the data before you then start pumping it into an application or data lake. It basically means that you can get the data to work for you immediately rather than working on the data for weeks and weeks to make it clean and useful for your application.
Nice. Well, let's look at how easy it is to work with Omnio Edge and hook it up to a cloud solution, in that case, IoT Central, which takes care of the visualization, analytics, and so on. But Omnio Edge takes care of making these devices connected, right? So walk me through a solution here where you have a demo. You have devices behind you that we're going to take a closer look at. So walk me through.
So we're used to dealing with a lot of different applications on the IT side, right? So anything from remote monitoring to energy management to predictive maintenance, right? So of course we have a test board here that we can show and demo with for our customers. So essentially what we have is something that'll be familiar to a lot of people. It's a gateway, a computer device of some sort. This is an Intel-based gateway. But here, now it gets a little bit more interesting because this is where the industrial devices start coming into play. So these two are two different drives that basically power supplies for motors in industry. And you can predict all kinds of things if you have the right data in the right quality from drives. Lots of predictive maintenance applications with that kind of data. And on top here, we then have some power meters, also from two different manufacturers, which are central to looking at anything that has to do with energy management, right? Now, the problem is that if you want to connect even one of these, you're going to have to read a manual like this, understand it, and then actually code it in to a piece of software so you can extract the data and make it meaningful. And then the problem just multiplies when you then have to do two different devices at the same time, because they'll have different naming structures, different data available, different everything, and another manual to read. So what we do...
And there was a lot of pages. There's a lot of things happening there, lots of registers to know and understand and so on, right? So
yeah, and also just the semantics of it. So what is the meaning behind the data, actually? Yep. How can I interpret this? Line A, is that the same as line 1? How do I understand this when I have to connect it to other devices as well, right? That's the main problem that we're trying to solve.
Got it. Okay, so now you have the gateway down there. The gateway is not just about connectivity and just about path through of data, right? So let's walk through what Omnio Edge looks like so that we can see what kind of experience people will get.
Exactly. So let's go to a demo. So in order to actually get Omnio Edge up and running, we need to build a configuration. And for that, we use our web-based portal, config.omnio.io, where I've created a new configuration here. And then I've added the Azure IoT Central endpoint, basically the URL and the SaaS token, right? And the system will then automatically verify that the token gives us all the rights that we need in order to do what we need to do. Right, next, we will add some devices. We also have a capacity to scan for devices. Just go the manual route so people can see the right way to do it. We have here a list of manufacturers of devices that we support. So let's just take the first one. That is a Schneider Electric ATV320. So we look up Schneider Electric and we get a list of all the devices that we support there, different product series, different product types. Ours is called an ATV320, so we're going to pick it here.
So that means that you at Omnio have been going through that paper manual to map out for each of these devices what their capabilities were.
Exactly. So we've actually not only mapped out exactly the capabilities of them, we also handle different firmware versions, different model combinations inside the devices, the hardware configurations and the software configurations. And we've done that for about 75,000 devices now.
Wow. Okay.
Quite a few. So we'll pick one of these. You also see there are two versions of this device here. So we'll just pick the default one. And then this is where we configure the IP, the connectivity parameters. So how do we connect to this device? So we'll choose Modbus TCP in this case, give it a name. So it has a name on Azure IoT Central as well, and put in the IP address. Good. Click next. Now, this is where we actually get to pick the data that we want. So essentially here, we've then listed the data that is available from this device through Omnio Edge, right? But not only that, you'll maybe note that we have a lot of little icons here called, which is the Omnio watermark, right? And when you see that, that means that we've actually taken the extra step of standardizing that. So we do that across all these devices for any drive that we have in our database. We've applied the same data model. So even though this device may not call analog output 1, actually analog input 1, we're going to call it that here because that's our standardized name for it, right? And that means that whether you're using this device or this device, it's going to be called the same, which is awesome when you're trying to put it into an application or a UI.
Got it.
Some of the other stuff that we do is that we actually also create data that doesn't exist in the device because we have a very we really try to build this standard data set for every device. And sometimes you come across devices that don't have that data natively available. So in that case, we then take other data available in the device and calculate it seamlessly in stream. So that's, for instance, a case for the DC bus voltage here. We calculate that based on data available in the device. So we'll pick some relevant data points here.
And interestingly, what you're showing here is how a customer will be able to quote unquote customize the type of data they want to funnel into their cloud application, right? They don't have to take everything in, and they can really just like bring in just the data they need.
Yeah, they can bring in exactly the data they need at exactly the frequency they want it, right? So you can down to the millisecond actually adjust how often you want this exact data point. And you can also set up a sort of a data volume limiting factor, which is this threshold here. Basically, you can say, I will only want any updates on this data if the change is bigger than, for instance, 5%. Okay. Because that can actually, there'll be a lot of jitter in the data, but if you just limit it by 1% or so, you'll eliminate many percent of the data, and especially in systems that start and stop. Yep. And that's a major saving. We've demonstrated 60 to 70% saving for some customers. Yep.
And one thing I like as well is that what you're doing right now is you're configuring the gateway. The gateway is the one that's going to filter that data and basically change the frequency and so on. You don't touch the devices themselves. It's like totally non-intrusive, and you don't have to re-flash firmwares or reconfigure these devices. Everything happens at the gateway level.
Exactly. So basically, we look at us as a software gateway, right? Because we are just a piece of software that runs on almost any hardware gateway, laptop, server, a Raspberry Pi or a big beefy rack server. Doesn't matter. We can run on all of it, right? We're just a software that runs on these systems. And it fixes everything. So now we've basically defined the data that we would like from this device and that we want it every second. And then all we have to do is actually just press finish. And now we're then going to click save and deploy. And then a lot of things are actually going to happen in the background. So first of all, we're going to create some devices on the IoT Central that we can send this data to. And we're also going to create the DTDL compliant device model template and put that into Azure IoT Central through APIs. And then we're going to connect and provision and authenticate those devices with the Omnio Edge automatically. And then we can actually start seeing data in the Azure IoT Central.
Interesting. So is the gateway doing a quote-unquote identity translation, as in each of these devices, now you have a model that's going to be pushed to IoT Central, but they're also going to be seen as individual devices, right? You were saying that you have different controllers behind you and so on. Each of them will be an individual, its own device in IoT Central.
Yeah, exactly. So basically they get their own device template, but they also get their own device representation. So essentially it's like as if we're not even there. It's like a transparent gateway, right? So basically they get their own identity, and that's how you see them when they come out. So you don't have to look at some abstract Omnio device that you then have to figure out. Nice. It's the real device that's represented.
Perfect.
And the final thing that you want to do is then grab this Docker run command that's already ready to run, and then just execute it on this gateway here, right? That's it. There's no more work to be done.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Right, let's go into Azure IoT Central and see what we did in there, right? Mm-hmm. So here we actually have the two device templates ready to go, right? They've been named according to the device that we chose. And we can then go and inspect it a little bit deeper. And so this is going to be the one for the drive where we chose a subset of the data to be communicated. Mm-hmm. But you'll see that we've actually modeled the full device here. And we've also added the capability type, so property, telemetry, and so on. And even the semantic type where it makes sense and where DTDL supports the specific type. So something like output frequency, for instance, is telemetry, and it's a frequency in the unit of hertz, right?
So did you created a model on the fly based on the configuration, based on selection from the user in the Omnio Edge configuration panel, right? So basically here, do we see all the possible properties that one of these devices can provide, or only the ones that the user selected?
So right. As it looks now, it's actually the full model, because then you can start to prepare for having more data if you wanted that. Right? Before you even deploy, you can then start working and seeing, okay, so I could also get this data. That might actually fit in nice here in my screen or something like that. Yeah, so that's what we allow for, right? Yep. Good. So we have the template, and then we can go and look at the devices. You'll see here that we have the ATV 320 here. It's been provisioned, and we should actually be seeing some data coming in. So let's see. Yeah, exactly. We're actually seeing some coming in, right? That's pretty cool. So some motor torque, some motor speed, some motor power, things like that.
Nice.
We'll go to the about say and say, okay, there's no alarm right now, and it's this exact model number. Very cool. Then we should actually be able to look at the raw data as well coming through.
Yeah.
So basically here you then see a stream of the raw data pouring in, and it's all model data. So basically we can look at it.
And because it's in IoT Central, like the user can actually, whether the operator or whoever is building the application on the back end, they can now create their own dashboards. They can put the layout they want, like put focus on data they need for the scenarios, for the application they're building. Here you're showing like the raw data, but then you can create as many dashboards as you want in IoT Central in a WYSIWYG way that just leverages the data that now is flowing into the app.
I think that's one of the, honestly, the most amazing things about Azure IoT Central is that it helps you go from nothing to just a dashboard that makes you actually look at the data in like seconds, right? Especially together with solutions such as Omnio Edge, right? That suddenly you actually get visibility into your data. It's not just one big jumble in a data lake somewhere. You get it on screen in a readable format in, it takes 10 minutes to set something like this up. Right? And that's just amazing, especially for small and mid-sized companies that are just starting their journey into this. It's a game changer for them.
It is.
And so we could try and turn on the drive here because we see now that the output we can see is at 0. So maybe we just turn this one on and give it a few RPMs and then wait for IoT Central to get it updated.
Yep.
But basically here we're then showing a subset of the data that we're pouring up, right? And it immediately actually allows you to start looking at your energy consumption, correlate data between each other, looking at power factors and so on, which is just, it's mind-blowing. If you come from the background that I came from in the industry where we spent weeks or months getting to this point, and then just to see it happen in front of you, it's crazy, right?
Yeah. One little word about the delay here. We had a few seconds delay for the data to show up, but that's only for visualization actually, because IoT Central does ingest the data in near real time from your gateway. And if you want to set up rules that will trigger actions, right, that are not related to the visualization per se of the data itself, you can do that and it will react as soon as the data enters into IoT Central without having to wait for it to be stored in Data Explorer and then visualized in the UI. So that little delay that you have for visualization, you don't have it if you set up rules and you want to really trigger a workflow immediately when the data has changed or whatever the rule is.
But again, that's another amazing thing, right? Because it doesn't just end at the dashboard, right? You can set up rules, you can trigger workflows, you can do all kinds of things in here and really sort of take your first steps, but not just, rudimentary dashboarding steps, also actually taking action on some of the data that you're seeing, right? And that's what we really want to support, to be quite honest. It has to be this easy for IoT to actually scale in industry. I'm convinced of it. That's what the medium and smaller size companies really, really need. And actually, most of the bigger companies as well, because it actually helps them get started, provide value immediately, test things out, and then they can scale in a different environment, right?
I'm with you 200%. And one thing I really love, and I always say that, is like a good technology must be out of the way. And here, the combination of Omnio Edge and what you're doing to unify the data from different types of industrial assets, combined with Azure IoT Central and how simple it is. Once you have the models being created, you can just like create your own dashboards, your rules, and then integrate into your workflows. This is not in the way. This is a tool that you use and you don't have to understand how it works. You just use it. And no manual required. So you can dump the big, huge data sheet and data set.
So the technology is out of the way and the manual is out of the way, right? That's what you want.
That's perfect. Mikael, thanks for a great demo. Omnio Edge, great product, great solution that integrates seamlessly in IoT Central. If you want to learn more, go check out the link below here, aka.ms/IoT show/Omnio Edge. Mikael, have a good one. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you very much, Olivier, and thank you for the great partnership.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.